Hi, my name's Caleb from ithinkbiblically.com, and in this video I want to look at a particular passage of scripture in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 27 verse 46. Let me read it to you, and this is when Jesus was hanging on the cross. It says this: "About 3 p.m, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, 'Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani,' which means, 'My God, why have you forsaken me?'" Did Jesus believe that he had been forsaken by the Father? Now, we all know he was speaking to the Father, and if you want an explanation of the Trinity, then please watch my video on how to explain the Trinity to Muslims. But I want to answer the question, did Jesus believe he had been forsaken by the Father? And my answer to that is no, and I'm going to prove it to you. First of all, we need to realize that Jesus is quoting from the first verse of Psalm chapter 22. Let me read it to you. Psalm chapter 22, verse 1. My God, why have you forsaken me?" Now, although this psalm begins with these words, the psalmist, David in this case, goes on to express his faith in God and ultimately declares that God would deliver him. Now, when Jesus begins quoting this psalm, we have to realize a couple of things. First of all, a psalm is a song. So it's very possible he was actually singing Psalm chapter 22, and all that is recorded for us is the first verse. So Jesus could have been singing Psalm chapter 22, knowing, because he was a Jew living in the ancient world, he knew that the psalmist David went on to express his faith in God and went on to express that God would deliver him. Therefore, when Jesus began singing this psalm, he wasn't just singing the first verse, he was singing the whole thing and declaring that God was faithful and would deliver him. Now, this psalm is actually very, very interesting because this psalm prophesied the very events that Jesus found himself in when he was being crucified on the cross. Let me read some of them to you. Psalms chapter 22 verse 16. "Dogs surround me, a pack of villains encircles me. They pierce my hands and my feet. All my bones are on display. People stare and gloat over me. They divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garments." What's fascinating about this psalm is that when Jesus was crucified, his hands and his feet were pierced with the nails as he was crucified to the cross. Not only that, but his inner organs and his bones would have been exposed because of the severe whipping that he went through at the hands of the Roman soldiers. But even more fascinating is that in Matthew chapter 27 verse 35, the very chapter where Jesus says the words, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Verse 35 tells us that the Roman soldiers were dividing up his garments by casting lots for them. Let me read it to you. Matthew chapter 27 verse 35, "When they had crucified him, they divided up his clothes by casting lots." So here we have at this point in the psalm, we have Jesus being crucified with his hands and feet being pierced. We have his bones being exposed, just like as the psalm says. And we also have his garments being parted and being divided up by casting lots. But not only that, there is another part of the psalm which is absolutely fascinating. It's in Psalm chapter 22, starting at verse 7. "All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord, they say. Let the Lord rescue him." Now, this also is in Matthew chapter 27. Matthew chapter 27, verse 39. "Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads." And then in verse 43, "He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now." Now, you have to understand that the Psalms would have been memorized by Jews since their childhood. And so when Jesus was hanging on the cross, seeing all these events being fulfilled that were spoken of in a well-known psalm, we see that it was fulfilled his hands and feet would be pierced, that his bones would be on display, that his garments would be divided through the casting of lots, and that people would shake their heads at him and say, "He trusted in God, let God deliver him." And Jesus, while hanging on the cross, seeing all these events take place in fulfillment of Psalm chapter 22, began singing that psalm, knowing that at the end of the psalm, God would deliver him. And so since all these other things have taken place, he could have faith and confidence that the end of the psalm would be fulfilled. And so no doubt when Jesus began singing this psalm, it would have been filled with joy. He would have been filled with joy singing this psalm from the depths of his heart, knowing that in that very moment he was fulfilling the will of God. I don't think for a second Jesus doubted that he was in the will of God, and he knew that God was right there and that God would deliver him. And that is exactly what happened. On the third day, he was raised from the dead, brought back to life. And now, since he's ascended into heaven, he lives forever to intercede for all those that will put their faith and trust in him and what he has done for them on the cross over 2,000 years ago. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever would believe in him should not perish but have everlasting life. And I encourage you to watch my video on how Jesus can be both God and the Son of God at the same time. And like and subscribe to this channel and hit the bell button so you can see more videos so that you don't miss great explanations of great biblical texts.